I have some things I wanted to show. Welcome. I have some things I wanted to show, but as I say, I wanted this to be an informal discussion. So I have some preliminary remarks. First of all, it's my understanding that in your roles you are interested in doing surveys or want to explore the possibility of doing surveys amongst your membership, and you'd have questions like these. What did my attendees like? What do they dislike about the event we just had? You'd have questions like, what topics should we have our lunch speakers cover? You might have questions like, should we change our meeting location? Maybe that's become a topic of conversation and want to know where people would like to be, etc., etc. So a lot of different kinds of things could be addressed with surveys. For those of you who just stepped in, this is going to be very informal. Okay.
So you can take your suit coat off if you'd like.
Yeah, I probably should. But
He's cold.
I'm chilly. So lots of different questions could be addressed with surveys, and I want to do two different things. In this survey, I want to take a very high-level look at things, but I also wanted to get it out into the details. So I want to do both, and we only have a little bit of time, so we'll see how things go. So in terms of some high-level comments, first I want to say good on you. Good on you for caring to do surveys, because there's a real temptation to rely on self, because you were there. You were at the event. You kind of know what was good and bad, so why do you need to do surveys? You see my point? I mean, there's this real temptation to rely on self in the eyes you have. You know what I mean? So I suggest to you that actual feedback from people is better than the guesses, the intuition that we have. In fact, I want to describe something called the false consensus bias. So this is a pervasive bias. There's something we all have. It's not a flaw you have, it's just the way people work. That we all suffer from this false consensus bias. Okay, the idea is that when I try and estimate how other people are, when I try to estimate how other people would respond to something, whether it's an ad, so I work in marketing, so whether it's an advertisement, hi, welcome. Whether it's an ad, or whether it's a product, or whether it's an event, we sort of try and guess, when we're trying to guess, we overestimate the extent to which other people are like us. We think that other people are just like us. Just like us in the way that, so if I didn't like this about the speaker, I'm pretty sure nobody else did either. If I didn't like this about the food, I'm pretty sure nobody else did either. We overestimate the extent to which other people are like ourselves. But when we open ourselves up to feedback, actual feedback, instead of guessing, wow, then we get much better, surprising information. When you get a surprise from a survey, that's good. So surveys and feedback in general allow us to get past this false consensus bias. Again, the idea that everybody's just like me. Well, they're not. They're not just like you, and they have different perspectives. And so surveys are. My core point is good on you for caring. So I want to talk with you about the key to success. If there's one thing I want to say, it is that the whole thing is about the guiding research question that you have. There's no, in my time in the industry, in marketing research industry, and then I went back for my PhD at the University of Michigan. I'm from Ann Arbor, so of course I'm going to go there. In my time in the industry and then also in academia, there is one driver to success in surveys, and that is this setting the guiding research question. I suggest to you, it's better to have a flawed answer to an excellent question than it is to have a perfect answer to the wrong question. It's all about the question. And when I say question here, I don't mean the exact question on the questionnaire. I'm talking about the guiding research question. That thing that is, the one question that boils down your reason for doing the survey. If that is good, the whole thing's going to be great. And if that is flawed, nothing can save it. And I don't care how good and how the methods are, nothing will save the value of this thing. So, where to spend your time on that? Spend your time making sure that guiding research question is good, and that it's what you really need to know. Spend your time on figuring out what should be included and what should not be included in that guiding research question. And everything else just kind of answers itself.
You're going to talk about how to know that you got the right research question?
Yeah, well, I have some ideas about that. As I looked at your, well, I want to say curriculum, but that's not what I mean. You know, the topics of the kind of the conference here, I think those are going to get at that big question. What should they be? Things like segmenting your membership was one of the options that maybe you'll be going to next, perhaps. Or other things about like how to keep them, you know, how to understand them, and what should you want to know, and all those kinds of questions. I suggest to you those are where you get the why. Sorry, the what should we be studying, the guiding research questions. And here I want to talk about how to answer them once you have them. But I can offer you, maybe in answer to your question, I can offer some litmus tests. How do you tell whether it's good or bad? All right.
But you're going to talk about surveying your membership, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Vague. If that question is vague and you don't really understand it, it's a danger sign. Incredibly complex. If one of the dangers of surveys is people want to know everything. And you know what else is a real danger? That phrase. And you know what else I'd like to know? That's a danger sign. So vague, clombing more things on there because you just like another curiosity. These are danger for a survey. It should have one purpose, core research question, maybe a secondary one if you really want to, but a core research question that is well crafted, that's the way to succeed here. For those of you who just stepped in, I just want to say again, I want to make this informal. I know I'm standing and I'm wearing a suit, but neither of those two things influence you. So, there are two basic approaches here to surveys, and two basic approaches to research. Qualitative and quantitative. I know those two words are similar. It's not my fault. Blame the Greeks. So, qualitative qualitative approaches. And a classic example here is focus groups. And by a raise of hands, who has participated in a focus group before? All right, so that was 42% of you, and that's a lot of you. By raise of hands, who's participated in a survey questionnaire before? Who's done that before? That was 100% of you. So, yeah, so survey questionnaires can have both. If you have filled out the rating scores of like 0 to 10, that kind of a thing, those would be used in a quantitative way. But maybe you filled out open-ended answers to questions on a questionnaire. What were the good things about this product? And you type in an answer, you write in an answer. Those open-ended answers are qualitative data. Even though it's done on a survey questionnaire, it's still qualitative, it's still treated that way. I put the words powerful here and here because they're both powerful. This one has, quantitative has a kind of a sheen of scienciness. It can't be a word, but I'm going to go with it. It has a sheen of scienciness about it, but in a research setting, they're both very powerful. I tried to come up with a metaphor. I did this morning, so I don't know if I'm not sure if I'm happy with this metaphor. It's not, we'll see. I tried to explain the fundamental difference between qualitative research and quantitative research. So what I was trying to get at here is that if someone, you, the listener, qualitative allows you to listen in a lot of different kinds of spectra, I think it's the plural of spectrum, in a lot of different ways of hearing from people. These methods are more flexible. And when someone wants to say something that maybe you had anticipated, these methods allow that to get into your ear. It is more open in terms of what it was listening to. Quantitative is much more narrow. It's only listening to that one narrow thing. But what it does do, though, is it listens, I was trying to do a horizontal, see what I'm saying? It listens more deeply on that particular question, and that very narrow issue. It does a better job of it. So this is not, there is no better or worse. It's just a trade-off. Qualitative lets you be open to more things. Quantitative lets you measure more deeply on that one thing. And so you got to know what it is going in. And you can't change it. Halfway through, you cannot say, I kind of think I'd like to listen more to that. You can't. You're only listening to that one thing, for better or worse. So, again, informal. Questions, comments before we keep moving? Okay. So let's talk details. Yes, please.
So really, on your survey, you're not kind of mixing, matching questions between the two?
No, I am. I do absolutely do. I do want to have them both. So it would be a real unfortunate thing to have in a survey setting.
Like all
Only-
qualitative or all quantitative?
Let me answer your question this way. So there are some people who specialize in one or the other, and then some people who recognize the value of both. I'm a recognize the value of both guy. In my experience, almost every survey would have both. You could have one or the other, but I suggest having both. It really should be tailored, though, to the research question, not any dogmatic sort of commitment to having both. So, in sum, both is usually the best. Great question.
And perhaps if you have only just a few minutes to get a response, you may want to do the quantitative, like just people shade in. Because qualitative, you probably have to write a paragraph or a sentence or something.
That's exactly right. It does take more effort. So if you're looking for just a quick response, I mean, if you've got, well, in fact, yeah, let me come back to that. It's a great thought. Let me come back to that in a moment. Yep. So, great questions, comments, others before we keep moving? Okay.
There's
Yes.
a software, I believe it's called Camtasia or something that you guys use for teaching. WIU?
Qualtrics?
No, it's called Camtasia or something. The chemistry department, I've seen them use it before, where they're teaching and they want feedback from the students very quickly.
Yeah.
And so they put a question on the board.
Yeah.
Just they teach a concept and then they do a very quick survey. A, if you understand it. B, if you don't. C, if you think I need to get into more depth. And the student just click and you have the answer.
Yes, we've got a variety of sort of technologies to do that. Some of the new ones have them not having a clicker, but they use their phone. Yeah, so that is that's a nice example of the most immediate but most simple. Yeah, it's a good example of that. So it is my understanding, I've never actually run a chapter of the Management Society, but it is my understanding that you are less in that situation and more in the situation of, I want to work well with my, can I use the word customers? They're not your customers, but.
Members.
I know, I'm just
Or
saying,
guests.
I'm just saying, as a marketing guy, I think of everybody as a customer, so forgive me if it's offensive, I didn't mean it to be so. So, let's talk about some details about how to do surveys. Did I see a hand? No, okay, I'm a little excited because I get paid by the question. No, I don't get paid. So there are some survey platforms. There are actually a number of these that are out there. The basic idea here is that you can use a web form and you can create an online questionnaire, and then you get that. There's a link to it. That it basically would be a website, and you have a link to that website, and you need to get that link to your people. Email is common. Social media is sometimes done. That's the basic approach. So they follow that link. They fill out the questions on that website, and then you download their responses into a spreadsheet so that you can analyze them. I'll show you. So what I did was I compared these. These things change a lot. I went through this morning and got the most up-to-date information, and I looked at the free options. All right. I don't know if you have a budget, but I just went for the free ones.
That's a good idea.
Because that the right approach. So survey. These are the four. These are the four biggest ones. And I looked at these dimensions. I looked at the number of questions that you can have. I'm talking about on the questionnaire itself. I looked at the number of participants you're allowed to have. Now, all of them would allow unlimited or practically unlimited responses, but for the free tier, they're going to hobble those, right? They're going to hobble that to make sure that, well, if you want more, you can buy the free one. You know, you can buy a premium one. So I looked at what the thresholds were for the free accounts in terms of number of participants they allow you to have. And it is my vague sense that 100 would be sufficient for every chapter. Is that right? Are there chapters that more than 100 people?
We have one event annually that
Uh-huh.
draws about 200 to 300 people.
Oh, okay. Well, then that, okay.
But on our monthly basis, it's about 40.
I see. Okay. So you can see here already that there are a few with unlimited responses. I also looked at whether you can participate on a mobile. I mean, a lot of people nowadays are using mobile devices, and all of them would let you do that. And then I have some notes for, in terms of my evaluation. I should betray my biases going in. I personally use Qualtrics, and I use it a lot. I do a lot of my stuff online, and I use Qualtrics, but frankly, BYU has a license. They have an enterprise license for that. In fact, it was started by Scott Smith. Are you familiar with Scott Smith and his story? So that company has become very successful. He used to be on our faculty here. He didn't do that anymore. He didn't got time for mere professing anymore. He's got a big business. So in any case, I use Qualtrics, but it has a free tier. That free tier is very hobbled. They really want to push you into the enterprise solution, and I don't have a good price. Prices I checked seem to vary a lot, but they are really pricey, like breathtakingly pricey. So anyway, I'll go through the free tier. So SurveyMonkey is common. Now SurveyMonkey is a pretty heavy hobble here in terms of number of questions and number of participants. So it's a good solution in terms of the interface. It's decent. It's fine. But it does have some pretty serious hobbles on the free tier.
What happens on the 101st participant?
It's my understanding that they collect it, but if you want to see it, you've got to go buy the upgrade. And I want to say that one's like $25 a month. Don't quote me. I guess I should have looked. So, yeah. Qualtrics. Did I answer that quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Qualtrics will let you have an unlimited number of questions, but only 100 people. And here's the kicker, to my mind. They will not allow you to export the data if you have the free tier. Now you can still see your data with their customizable reports, but you can't download it and calculate the things you want to calculate and do what you want to do with it. Now for me that's a deal killer, but they don't have that hobble in the enterprise level. So I'm actually going to warn you away from that because of that no data export. But you're agents of yourselves. You can choose whatever you like. Survey Gizmo. This is actually going to be my recommendation. Survey Gizmo is unlimited in terms of the number of questions, unlimited in terms of the number of participants. It does do it on mobile. It does have some hobbles. Here, like in all of them, they all have these hobbles where they're trying to push you into a paid tier. But this hobble is things like you can't insert images. You can choose whether that's painful or not. But the interface is, I think, the most intuitive of all of them. And it's pretty good. So if you're looking for a recommendation for me, I'd choose Survey Gizmo. Google Forms exists. The downside of Google Forms is that the interface itself to create the questionnaire is not terribly intuitive. Oh, I just realized I've been a little bit unclear. All of them can create a good experience for the participant. When I said the interface was unclear, I was talking about for you, the creator. But that's a little unclear.
I use Google Forms regularly. I love it.
Do you?
It's very, very easy to make.
It's very easy
I
to
made one
learn.
in 5 minutes yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I
There's
think
another one called Jot Forms, and both Google Forms, Jot Forms.
I'm talking learning curve.
Yeah.
So once you get accustomed
If
to
you
it.
spend a
yeah,
little bit
yeah,
of
yeah.
time.
Absolutely. So, in terms of learning curve, Survey Gizmo is my recommendation. If you've never done this before, if you have a favorite, clearly, that'd be the right thing. Questions on this at all? I contemplated putting in URLs and such, but you know what? I know you know how to use Google, so I didn't bother. There you go. So I wanted to talk about some issues with questionnaires. First of all, fatigue, response fatigue. Long questionnaires, I see our incentive is we want to know more, but then it just adds and adds and adds to this questionnaire, right? How long is too long? Well, I can't give you an answer to that. Instead, what it depends on is that the effort it takes to participate should be less than their motivation to participate. That's the fundamental idea. Now, we can influence the participation effort. How do we do that? How do we influence how much effort it takes to participate?
Less questions, easier questions.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Not only less questions, but easier
Precise.
questions. Yeah. And you mentioned like the response mode, right? So
Yeah.
the click versus the typing out. Yeah. Please.
As far as the motivation goes, it may be because I'm a millennial, but I'm more willing to do them when there's an incentive. So the outdoor rec center where I go to school, they give you 40% off if you, on your next purchase, if you fill out their survey. And it's just a
40% off.
on your next purchase after you fill
That
out the
is a
survey.
ridiculously large incentive.
Yeah. So maybe that's a bit much.
That may be the
but
biggest incentive I've ever heard of.
Any
it's awesome.
purchase?
Yeah, I got a Camelback for like $6 because I did the survey.
Holy cow.
It was awesome. So maybe that's a bit
big.
extreme, but it's working for them.
Well, they value
But,
it so
um,
much, your response so much.
You'll know if it's working for them if they're still in business in a couple of years.
No, but it's a limited time.
Oh, maybe that's Is there some sort of I have to know? Is there some sort of limit on when the discount is applied?
Give a month. I mean, it's a BYU Idaho thing, so they're not really. I mean, it's not like a big company or anything. They're just there to help the students. But they sell a lot of stuff.
That is definitely the biggest incentive.
Oh, they've
I've ever heard.
marked up the Camelback so much, they still make money at $6.
So your broader point is absolutely right. That one way to increase motivation is to offer an incentive, right? So what are some of the incentives you could offer your participants? Please.
We do one, and that's our problem. We just pass it around, paper one at the end of luncheons or something. And if we did a drawing or something, and that people would probably do it a lot more. I just thought of that.
Okay, a drawing for something
For
that
something they want.
swag.
iPad.
Gift card.
No.
Yeah. Well, okay, maybe you don't have iPads laying around, and that's the trick, isn't it? To offer an
Yeah,
incentive
like
that people
a
would.
free meal somewhere, or
Gift card.
dinner for two, or a gift card or something. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Or our sponsors chip in stuff, jazz tickets or whatever.
Sponsored stuff. Okay, great. How about? Do you have access to BYU swag?
Are you kidding?
Flash drives.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if you give them out like candy already, then it's no incentive. But if it's something that they don't see every day, then, oh, okay, that's fun. Yes.
I never knew that till yesterday.
Okay. Any other incentive ideas that you have? All
I
right.
guess on our limited budget, if we're giving away gift cards, maybe it would be one of those things that you get entered for a drawing for a gift card, or is that how you'll?
Right.
what
Yeah.
I was
That's
talking
what I
about.
would think. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a monthly breakfast meeting, perhaps they could get a free breakfast next month.
Okay. All right. That's a great idea. Please.
Does giving away something skew I mean, have you done studies on how that affects the response? Do you get people who are just putting something in there to enter to win? Because I think I would see myself doing that more than answering it truthfully on just if I didn't care.
There have been a lot of research on incentives, and the bigger problems are question bias. In other words, if you make it, I'll talk about question bias in a minute, but that would be a far bigger problem than people just doing a haphazard responses. Particularly if you do a good job with this, with keeping participation effort low, right? There's this constant relationship between how much effort it's going to require from them and their motivation. And if all you've done is give them just a little bit of motivation, you can only ask a little bit of them. So 1, 2 questions that are 0 to 10 kind of scales. Was it really worth your time to fake it? You might as well just answer the right question, the truth. But if it's a big long questionnaire with a big long, people start to fake. Yeah. So, how else can I increase the motivation or decrease this? Either one serves.
Promise you'll stop contacting them if they give you an answer.
Well, okay, so implied in what you're saying, isn't it, that a repeated contact, right? So there is too much, there is a too much, but there's also a not enough. You see what we're saying? There's also a not enough. If you just ask them one time, it might get ignored. But if you ask them multiple times, that's the industry standard. You ask them multiple times.
I like to be told easy, less than 5 minutes, because there's nothing worse. You go into a page and it looks like one page, and then you fill it out, and then it says like 1 of 40 or something.
Right. Yeah, the progress kind of a thing.
Yeah, the progress.
Nothing worse. Oh, so great. So this is, I said participation effort, but it's not about their truth, is it? It's about their anticipated, their perceived perception effort going into it. Nicely said.
So brought up something about frequency as far as how often you drip on them to remind them to go do that. Is there kind of a general rule of thumb of how many times you want to drip on them to have them complete that survey?
So most surveys will do the biggest kinds of studies will do a pre-announced letter where they'll say, or it's an email or whatever, where they'll say, you're going to receive an invitation. Then you receive an invitation, and then among non-responders, they would get a follow-up, and then among non-responders, they might get one more follow-up. That's for a big-time study. I don't think that that's really necessary if you're talking about you've got 50 people, and you'd like to get the temperature of the group. There may be one, and then a reminder. And just let me say this about the reminder. One of the difficulties of administering such a survey is keeping track of who responded and who didn't. And I will talk about anonymity in a moment. So, for reminders, an easy way is to get around this problem is to say, if you haven't already participated, let me just give you that link again. That way you don't have to keep track of who has participated. It's tricky. It's really tricky to do that. So, did I answer your question? I want to say something that I meant to say at the beginning, but I forgot to. So let me just say it now. You're probably going to catch a whiff of me saying, for big time studies do this, but for this, just do the simpler version. I don't mean to suggest that this is not important. Instead, I'm trying to get at this idea of the research question is what really matters. And these nuances of like using the very best methods, frankly, not worth the time. I'm a marketing professor. You'd think I wouldn't say that, but I do. I am saying that. I've worked in some of the most high dollars, like quantitative analyses, and the juice you can squeeze out of that beyond the basic is just not worth the time. Now, if you were saving lives, fine. If you have a budget of $500,000, fine. But you're just trying to get a good sense of take the temperature of the group. It's not worth your time to go do the high dollar quantitative methods. That's my take on it. I just want to say again, your quest is valuable, but do you get much juice, much extra, much lift out of those high dollar quantitative methods? I say to you, no. Instead, I say to you, work on that guiding research question. So that's the key. That's where to put your time. I suggest to you to have 3 smaller, quick surveys would be much better for you in terms of making decisions than one highly designed, polished survey. A big thing. It's far better to have the small glimpses. Anything else? So there are more things for motivation. Anything else that you could please?
When the survey is of general interest, and I receive an email that says participate in this survey, I like it when they share the results with me.
Do you?
So so for me that's a motivation. When they sometimes a survey that I like, I want to see what is going on. Which device is better, the Samsung 7 or the iPhone 7?
Oh.
I answer based on what I know, but I want to know what the community, knows. And so it
Interesting.
makes me excited to want to actually do it
Yeah.
and then get a response.
I would think in your work here as part of a chapter, you might have difficulty sharing those results. It may be impolitical for you to do that, yes?
Well, it depends on what we're trying to
Okay,
elicit.
okay. Fair
Right.
point.
If we want to know, for instance, whether breakfast meetings or lunch meetings are better for people, we may do a little survey of our group, right? And then maybe it's nice to see what other group members think.
Yeah.
So immediately right after I respond, I get to see what the other group members think.
In terms of industry practice, some people do announce, they'll say in terms of increasing anticipated motivation to do it, they'll say, if you participate, you'll get the results. I don't see that a whole lot, but I think it's because of the other thing, they're reluctant to share them. So if you feel like you could, then it's something you could promise, sure. Anything else impacting motivation here? Let me suggest a couple, like at least one more, and maybe this, I think this is probably intuitive to you. When you're working with the BYU Management Society, these people have an inherent goodwill for you. They love you, right? And so you're going to use that for a while. You can coast on just that alone, and you're going to get a lot of respondents. Not everybody, but a lot of respondents. So if you take that and then you add promises if it's brief, of course you have to keep it brief. That'll build their goodwill for next time. In other words, if you can get known for having just a brief questionnaire after every event or after every occasion when you have questions, if you can get known in the society in the chapter for being brief about it, people will start responding more. A few other things that are essential for questions. Unbiased. So I'll be brief here because we're at the end of 11. Yes. Unbiased in the sense that you could violently move around answers to questions just by the way you ask them. You want to be clean. You want to ask these things in as best you can in an unbiased way. I suggest simple questions as opposed to complex, and if you have to explain it, that's a danger sign. Double barrel questions are something to avoid. Let me explain what that is. If you've got a question that says this and that, the word and in any question is a danger sign. Let me explain. Or let me give an example. If I said for this month's speaker, was he or she engaging and interesting and useful? That was a triple barreled. I came up with a 3. When you have this and that, you try to measure both at the same time. I don't know if they answer low, if they if they disagree or whatever. I don't know what they disagreed with. I don't know if they thought it was interesting but not engaging, interesting and engaging but not useful. I don't know. I don't know how to interpret those. So the classic advice is just to avoid them. Split them apart. Don't have it be double-barreled. Have it be one thing. You can ask a question about interesting. You can ask a question about useful. But, entertaining or whatever. But having them jump all pile of, what's the word I'm looking for? Smushed? Amalgamated into one question is not good. Anonymity. So this is tricky. You can have questions be anonymous, and you can. This boils down to a question of: do you ask them what their name was, or their email address? Even you can ask them, and if you ask them, let me propose one good thing. You've got visitors at the event, and you hand out, you give out this questionnaire. Maybe you get some more contact information from people. On the other hand, they're no longer anonymous, and so they may be less frank in their answers. So that's when you're going to have to think about. I personally would recommend anonymity, but you're much closer to that situation than I am. I could definitely see you saying, no, we want to collect new information. Please.
On the bottom of ours, we put, would you like to be involved? And if so, list your name and so that's a way for us. We often get
Really?
people saying, yeah, I'd love to be involved, and we're able to call them and extend an invitation to be on a committee or something.
That's an excellent practice.
So that's along with the survey.
Yeah, and I think if I understand you correctly, that's optional. They don't
Yeah.
have to. Yeah, no, that's excellent. That sounds like the best of both worlds. Nice. Yeah, okay, great.
As related to the other breakout about segmenting, this is where you at least gather demographic information.
Yes, you certainly could. Particularly if you feel like people vary on that. Absolutely. So, I've put together just a brief example. I quite literally put this together in my office this morning, so I do not do not take this to be the gold standard of what you ought to be using. But I just wanted to communicate my point that these things can be mixed. So overall, what's your evaluation of today's event? I wrote a 1 to 8 scale. By the way, people will sometimes choose an even number versus an odd number. That's controversial amongst people who really care about this sort of thing and run tests about this sort of thing. The deal is that if you choose an even number, there is no middle point. You force them to choose a little bit higher, a little bit lower. If there's an odd number, then there is an even middle point, and they can be middle ground. Does it matter? I don't know. All I can tell you is that a lot of people will, no, some people will spend a lot of time talking and arguing about that. I'm personally not certain whether it's worth the candle of fighting over. I would much rather see somebody have a good guiding research question, the key, than sweat over whether it's an even number or an odd number of points. This much I can say, keep it consistent. Choose one and just keep it. Because if you change it later, now you can't compare very easily. So choose one and then go with it, and don't feel bad about your decision because you can hardly go wrong. Well, 2 is bad, but like you give it 5, give it 7, give it 10, whatever you like. Okay, so an overall thing, and then some open-ended questions. This is the qualitative data. What are some of the positive things about today's event? What were some of the negative things about today's event we want to improve for next time? I've included this. That's the kind of thing you could include this parenthetical here. That's the kind of thing you could include if you, in past experience, were not getting enough negatives. I've included that parenthetical to say, no, seriously, tell us, because we'd like to be, Now, if you're getting plenty of people, vomiting negative, then there's really no reason for that parenthetical, right? So I worked in the auto industry, and we would look at new product development. We'd show cars to people, and some of them they hated, and they have no problem telling you when they hate something. If you're experiencing a lot of negativity, you don't have to have that kind of thing. But I urge you to have the box. You see what I'm trying to say? I urge you to ask. It would be a sad thing if you only had that, and then this month's scores were particularly low. Why? Is the natural next question. I have no idea. All I can tell you is that without these, I don't know. But with these are great. Now, these are going to yield qualitative data. So let me talk about analysis. Well, actually, let me do it with this slide. Let me talk about analysis. For this sort of a question, all kinds of quantitative answer questions. When you download this from, SurveyMonkey or whatever, you download a spreadsheet, and the columns in the spreadsheet will be the questions, and the rows will be the respondents. So this grid, yes. So for this questionnaire right here, there would be a 1, there would be a 3, there would be a 7. Or is it a 5? I'm not sure. And then there'd be these typed open-ended answers here for these other ones, for these other 2.
So it breaks out each respondent's response?
Yes. I guess if I'm drawing what's on the board, it would look like that. So it would literally, from SurveyMonkey, you would be downloading a spreadsheet that looks like this, and this person said for question 1 they put a 1. And then they typed that, and then they typed that. For respondent 2, they typed a 3, they clicked the 3, and then they typed that, and then they typed that. Now for analyzing these things, if you know Excel, I'm sure it's obvious to you how to calculate the average for this. That would be the average score for this question 1. I want to talk with you about how to analyze qualitative data. I've already argued it's powerful. In my last few minutes, let me talk about how to analyze it. The typical way to analyze qualitative data from a survey is to look at them not by respondent, but by question. Take all the responses to that question, read over them, and see if I can identify themes. this, what I'm about to say takes some trust, but I've seen it happen so many times. Themes emerge from what they're saying. It's really amazing. Themes will start to bubble up. You kind of go into qualitative going, man, I don't know what the responses are going to be. Could be anything. And when you look at the responses, themes really do. They bubble up. They emerge is the words that they use in qualitative methods. Those themes emerge, and you, by looking at each of those answers, will identify those themes. It is awesome, extra awesome, if you can identify hierarchical themes. So if you could say, one thing is related to the facilities, another category of themes is related to the speaker, and a third category of themes is related to our management. And then sub-themes. So the ones about the facility were about the temperature and then the food. And then the ones about the speaker were he never did take off his suit coat, and then even despite his claims of informality, whatever it is. So hierarchical themes are great. So that in step one, you've identified the themes. In step two, go back and see which how I do it is I insert a new row. Sorry, I said row, I meant column. You insert a new column and then identify which themes that person hit on. So when that person, they mentioned the facility and the speaker. Specifically, they mentioned what did I say? The temperature and the boring nature of the talk. Whatever it was, you code each of those so that at the end of the day you can say, we had a theme bubble up about the temperature, but it was so minor. Only 4% of the people mentioned it. It was really not a big prominent theme. But 82% of the people mentioned the humor of the guest or whatever it was. So it takes these things and it attaches a kind of a quantitative analysis to those qualitative data. Please.
It seems like you might see connections there that would be helpful, like 80% of the people that complain about temperature also said it was boring. So their perception of how interesting it was probably related to how they physically felt. Is that something you can glean?
My hemming and hawing about that is that you absolutely could. It's just that takes a long look to be able to identify those things. It's actually tricky to accomplish what you're saying, but you're absolutely right, you could. You're absolutely right, you could. The reason it's tricky is because we've got, they could be mentioning any one of the themes, multiple mentions of different themes, and so as a practical matter, you've got different columns here, and did anybody mention that any of those themes also mention any of these other themes? It's a tough analysis to do. It can be done, but it's tricky. It's asking a lot. Right. Sure. So, in my last 60 seconds, I just want to say again, as useful as surveys can be with your people, I urge you to spend much more time thinking about what the guiding research question should be, and less time worrying about whether it should be 8 or 9 points on the response scale. I've done a lot of marketing research methods. Is one of the things I teach in the MBA program. You might think that I would stand here and say the methods are everything. Actually, I'm saying the opposite. Use reasonable methods if you follow the things like, don't have them be terribly biasing, make them relatively short and easy to understand. If you do that basics, the methods will be fine. Far more important is the managerial research question. Spend your time setting that.
What's one example of a guiding theme? Sorry if I missed
Yeah,
it.
no, no problem. So the guiding research question, like, what is our satisfaction among our chapter members? Do they like our chapter? Guiding research questions like, do they like our events? Do they like this particular event? Notice the difference between those two things. Do they like our events overall versus do they like this specific event? The subtle difference between that makes all the difference in terms of the research project you'll be doing. And so I urge you to think carefully about that.
And try not to mix too many.
Yeah, if it's too complicated, you'll never accomplish any of them. Figure out the one and maybe two things that you really need to know and hit that. And if there's one thing I've said here, that qualitative is as useful in there as quantitative. The impulse is for people to use these.
Yeah.
But these allow the flexibility, right? What I was saying about the different spectrum. This allows people to answer whatever they wanted. You didn't think of temperature, but it's on there because they said they volunteered it. Or I don't mean you. Maybe you thought of temperature.
So-
You know what I'm saying?
Selfishly, last question, or
Yeah.
my last question. Our chapter is like an hour in every direction. So
Oh.
we got to figure out how far will people travel. It's not necessarily where they live, obviously, it's where they work. And so a guiding theme would be, would you pick and say, out of these 3 cities would you come to? Or would you actually have them say, how far would they drive?
I'm going to answer neither of those two. I'm going to say that the guiding research question should be, what cities would be acceptable?
But list them, prompt them, and.
Well, yeah, I'm getting at the difference between
Yeah.
the guiding research question for you
Yeah.
and then the exact specific questions on the questionnaire.
Yeah.
I'm urging you to think more about what the guiding research question for you should be. And once you nail down, it's about what cities they're willing to be at, to meet at, as opposed to hotel, what kinds of facility, as opposed to what days of the week. All right, these are big questions. You solve the big questions, and then the nitty-gritty questions you can't go too far wrong.
Okay.
That's our time. Thank you for coming. This has been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for participation.